So you found the skeleton. How would you tell people that this happens? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, it's time for another pre-recorded Kent with Bent with, of course, my co-host, Bent Hovind.
Hello everyone. Good
Hello.
morning, good afternoon, good evening, etc.
And of course, I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. You might recognize me from such films as Creationism is a Mega Catastrophe, or Dude, Where's My Con Man?
Those are really good movies.
Thank you.
Really good movies.
Yes. So, we are continuing today with 100 Reasons Why Evolution is So Stupid, which is not handily broken down into reasons.
I think I had reason one, kind of. And it was that the one, textbook said, the outdated textbook had said the Big Bang was an explosion instead of an expansion. That's the only thing that I could maybe say was, one of the 100... What is it? The 100...
Reasons Evolution is so...
Somethings.
100 Reasons Evolution is So Stupid.
I have to write this down because I keep forgetting that. 100 reasons. How many O's in so?
I mean, as many as you want, really.
I ran out of paper. 5, stupid. Okay, so, yeah, that's not really evolution, though. But if Ken thinks it's part of cosmic evolution, and he's like, no, it was an expansion, and they said explosion, then I could maybe give him credit for that being one of 100 reasons why evolution is so stupid. But that's not what he did at all.
Well, let's go over our drinking game rules for those of us who want to play along, which, of course, Kent with Bent doesn't really encourage. We take no responsibility or accept any liability for any damages that you may do to yourself or property or others. So, play along at your own risk, and we do not encourage that you do so. However, if you do want to, we take a drink whenever Kent Hovind gets something right that he's not just quoting from someone. We take a drink whenever he says something that's so stupid we just kind of have to. We also take a drink whenever Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't laugh, but his audience for this video is super, super friendly, and they laugh at, everything. Oh! And we drink whenever Godzilla or Mothra come around. Alright. And, let's see.
We also... that never happened, and shower thoughts.
Yeah, we also drink for whenever Kent tells a story that we're pretty sure didn't happen, or he confuses his shower thoughts for real memories, which are basically the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go. Let us continue with 100 Reasons Evolution is So Stupid. Here we go.
Well, that joke ended.
Spontaneous applause.
All right.
I do believe in the Big Bang, folks. I really do. The Bible teaches the Big Bang. 2 Peter 3:10 says, the heavens shall pass away with a great noise. In the original Greek, that's a Big Bang.
Thanks,
so there's going
Kent.
to be a Big Bang. It just didn't happen yet. That's all. So kids, if you go to school and some professor says, do you believe in the Big Bang? You should say, yes, I do. And you better get saved and get ready for it.
Absolutely do not say that. First of all, I don't know why any professor would ask you if you believe in the Big Bang. It's a weird thing. I've never been asked that. I took astronomy, and the professor never said, "No, Dapper."
When I was taught evolution, they didn't say, "Do you believe in evolution?" They said, "Whatever the book said." Like they did their lesson plan.
Right?
They just teach it. They don't care what your religious beliefs are.
Yeah, it's crazy.
For them. They don't care what they're not against your religious beliefs. It doesn't matter to them. They're just teaching you what they're teaching you because it's the truth. And that's their job. They're professors. Their job is to teach
I didn't drink for that Godzilla. Oh, crap. That's actually coming through on my thing because I forgot to do a thing. Sorry, everybody. I might try to edit that out. Yeah, you're not hearing it.
Okay.
But so yeah, well, yeah, so first, no one's ever going to ask you that question because it's weird. But second, if for some mysterious reason someone were to actually ask you that question, do not respond that way.
Why not?
That will get you put on that professor's list of pretentious jerk students.
Wait, that wouldn't immediately convert them?
No, that
It would
will
drive
just
them away from the
that will just
religion?
make them think of you as
Wow.
insufferable.
So speaking the truth in love might be what Kent's forgetting about what the Bible says to be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Kent, like, that's not going to convince anyone. Do you really want to convert them? That's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
Pretend you're in that professor's shoes and you hear a young punk kid talk to him that way. Like, are you going to be like, oh, I should believe him and adopt his religion? Oh, Kent, no. No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that, Kent. Come on.
So, what you might want to say is if you're in a position of being a young Earth creationist, is say something like, well, my religion believes in X, and I think that that's reasonable for reasons Y and Z. And then your professor will most likely not be interested in debating this topic. Will say, okay, well, that's cool, but you do have to complete the assignments, and you do have to be able to show that you understand the material that we're teaching in this class. And then that will be the end of it. So you know who doesn't want to get sued? Your professor. Here we go.
And
The Big Bang.
professors are decent people. Every professor I've ever had has been a decent person.
Even that one who ate babies?
I don't remember that professor.
Oh.
Like baby chickens for breakfast, maybe like eggs. Not even baby chickens.
No. They've never been
Some
fertilized.
eggs. But yeah, I mean look, if you give a response like Dapper just said, like a super respectful thing, like the only thing that I could think any of my professors ever would have not liked about it is that it's like lecture time and you're interrupting that with something that is
Well, hey,
probably
they started the interruption by asking you for no reason if you believe in the Big Bang, so it's their fault.
Yeah, okay, so that's true. That is true. In that scenario, yes, that would be.
So that's on them.
I
Here we go.
forgot that because that's not. No one would ever do that.
No, it's a crazy scenario.
I'm picturing a realistic scenario in my head, and I'd already forgotten that Kent had.
The only thing I could think of is maybe it's office hours, and you come in to discuss this very topic for some reason.
Well, so what would happen is you'd go into office hours, say what you said. Hey, I'm part of this religion, and we believe X for reasons Y and Z, and then the professor might say, do you believe in the Big Bang? To get some clarification.
Yeah, maybe.
So that if that's what Kent's describing, he's really not setting this up in a
No.
reasonable
Well, here's the
way.
thing. Kent's never been to college, so he doesn't know what it's actually like.
It's really true. And you know what? That was the first thing that made me remember Kent Hovind, I think, was like when I was first in college. I was like, oh, I have to learn about evolution now. And like, this is it. Because I went to private schools that just didn't teach that.
Yeah.
How am I going to do? Am I going to yell at the teacher? Am I going to be able to just behave and not get in trouble? I don't know. And then I was like, wait, this is all reasonable. They're
Yep.
actually giving reasons why evolution makes sense. A thing that I had never heard before.
Except
I
from
didn't
me.
know how to find it. Even then, yeah, but I didn't know how to find it. My school didn't teach it. It was a young Earth creationist curriculum. My church didn't teach it. It was a young Earth creationist church. I don't really know how to look stuff up on like Google or whatever back when I was in high school. I graduated in 1999. And then I just stopped caring about that stuff as a young adult because I had guitars to play and deployments to go on and all that. Like how,
Yeah.
until you finally can get the correct education and then be like, oh my goodness, this is actually reasonable. Why
Who
are
knew?
we lying about this?
All right, here we go.
Is coming soon to a city near you. By the way, if the Big Bang Theory were true, the matter would be evenly distributed. But it's not. It's lumpy. They're called galaxies, and in zillions of miles and nothing called voids.
So that's broadly true. So first I'm going to take a drink. Kent is roughly describing the the structure of the universe correctly. Now, but here's the other thing. At a large enough scale, the universe is actually roughly evenly filled with matter. Right? So, because think about it this way, right? Let's just say you have like a gold. No, not gold. Let's say you have a solid chunk of graphite, right?
Okay.
If you were to zoom into the atomic scale, the distance between the atoms is pretty significant, and the actual amount of space taken up by like the nucleus is very small even within that space. And then the electrons probably don't actually have a volume, so the space they take up is essentially 0. So, do you have an evenly distributed block of carbon, or do you have a bunch of tiny, tiny, super high density points? Well, both. Both can be true at the same time. It just depends on what scale you're looking at it on. And on a human scale, yes, the universe is very lumpy. That's fair. But on a cosmic scale that's large enough, it's not really all that lumpy. It's actually fairly evenly distributed. So, oh,
There's a
drink
couple
from Mothra.
reasons. There's a couple other reasons that I can think of. One might be a misunderstanding on my part, though.
Okay.
And another one, I know I don't understand, but I just know what it is. Or at least I think I do. Quantum fluctuations at the early expansion of the universe, like it prevented a true, perfectly even distribution of matter and energy.
That is correct.
So that's kind of how some galactic superclusters maybe thinking of kind of look the way they do.
Well, actually, that explains just
smaller scales. There's still gravity, so like all that matter that you see in a galaxy, that was, I don't know how, like, was it all even and then it just kind of clumped together in galaxies eventually, or I don't really know. But we do have galaxies now, and we do know that they pull on each other from great distances.
So they're primarily the result of two different things. One is quantum fluctuations at even very tiny levels resulted in higher and lower densities in the initial universe as it expands from a scale factor of essentially 0, right? But then before you get the decoupling of light from matter when the universe is just opaque, the dominant way that energy actually gets transmitted is not via the electromagnetic force, it's actually through sound. And so these pressure waves actually end up creating you get dense, less dense, dense, less dense as you go. And those actually were sort of the seeds that started some of the collapse of what would become galaxies eventually. So those two things together resulted in the lumpy nature of the universe at certain scales. But again, at large enough scales, it's more or less all the same. So we'll
watch PBS Spacetime.
Yes.
Way better job explaining in a pretty recent episode, I believe, of what I
watch Matt O'Dowd.
Yeah.
And to try to salvage the dumb Big Bang Theory, they've got all these wild theories of why isn't the matter evenly distributed? They'll say, well, maybe there's black holes, or maybe...
That wouldn't explain it. I'm going to take a drink, because that's a straw man. Oops. Sorry, I went back 10 seconds.
Nothing called voids. And to try to salvage the dumb Big Bang Theory, they've got all these wild theories of why isn't the matter evenly distributed? They'll say, well, maybe there's black holes, or maybe there's antimatter. They got all this stuff. It's all trying to rescue this crazy Big Bang
Theory. There are black holes
theory.
and there is antimatter, but
neither of those are explanations.
With a potential uneven distribution of.
Now there is still the open question as to why the universe is predominantly matter and not antimatter. That is an open question. Like, why isn't there more antimatter? Because as far as we can tell, matter and antimatter essentially behave the same, except for the variables like spin and charge being flipped. But that shouldn't preclude an antimatter galaxy. And if equal amounts of matter and antimatter were created at the beginning of the universe, by now it should have pretty much all just annihilated each other, and the universe should just be electromagnetic radiation. That's not what we see. And that is an interesting question. I don't know that anyone has the answer for it, but, hey.
I think an obvious question emerges, are there galaxies made of antimatter? And what I don't know the answer to is do we have a way to test that? And I think science does, but I don't know if it does.
I believe there is, and I'm not sure.
I don't know how it is. It might be something that they figured out a real simple way to do, but I don't know. But it would be really interesting, especially you could do some interesting things with science fiction in that, but I guess the more you know about how it works,
that would be a dangerous galaxy to visit.
Yeah. For someone like me who doesn't really know that much about it, like the science fiction might not bother me. As like certain things I know about science, I'm like, oh, that's not how that would work. That's not how that would work, and then I just don't like some science fiction because of it. But anyway, I'm ready to move on.
And it's a dud, folks. It didn't happen. There are zillions of stars out there. I mean, lots and lots of stars. And we haven't even seen them all. If star births, they ought to at least equal star deaths, and they don't. We see a star blow up about every 30 years.
Why do star births have to equal star deaths, like the rate of star
Because
deaths?
otherwise, we would have a trend in the number of stars, which I don't see why that would be a problem. So it actually is not the case.
If we had more starbursts than star deaths right now, we would just be seeing more and more stars. But like, how long does that take for that to happen? And
it would be
time scale.
Right, that's the thing.
And the other way around, if it were reducing number of stars, how would any human know that in their time scale?
Yeah, like right now we are probably on the decline in terms of number of stars in the Milky Way, but between like your birth and death, there will be essentially no appreciable difference.
A nova or a supernova. Well, then how come there are only 300 dead stars out there that we can see, supernovas?
Oh, because supernova remnants aren't detectable for very long periods of time. What you're actually showing us is about how long it takes for a stellar remnant to go from being very obviously detectable to essentially impossible to detect directly. That's all that's happening here.
Huh. It's only a few thousand years worth, isn't it? There ought to be trillions of them. If evolution were true.
I mean, yeah, there probably are trillions of white dwarfs and black holes and neutron stars out there, Kent. But it's really hard to see a neutron star if, say, one of its, electromagnetic jets doesn't occasionally oscillate in a way that faces Earth. Because it doesn't actually give off much else in terms of radiation that we can easily see. Now, it does give off more X-ray radiation, and X-ray telescopes have been helping us find new neutron stars. But then again, what about little faint white dwarfs out in the middle of nowhere? What are you going to see? Nothing.
What about black holes out in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, unless they're active, or they're acting gravitationally on nearby objects, which they might not be.
Black holes with nothing behind them that they can really affect the. Look, a small, tiny black hole, thousands and millions of light years away. How's that going to really do gravitational lensing at a galaxy behind it? Is it detectable?
Not from Earth, probably.
How accurate are our instruments, or can they be, to detect something that might be a black hole the size of a continent or something like that's that far out?
Yeah. So basically, all we're getting here is like, how long does a planetary nebula last? A few thousand years? Okay, sure, that's fine. It's the same thing.
I look at the category 100 reasons evolution is so stupid, and I don't even if Kent was making a valid point, I don't see how that would be.
Yeah. Well, to make an analogy, his point here is like saying, hey, we only see, well, no, that analogy doesn't work. Never mind, I'll just keep going. You guys get it. And if you don't get it...
Watch space-time, they'll tell you about it.
Fella said I have a little hesitation in saying that a sickly pall now hangs over the Big Bang Theory. Yeah.
Now from 1984, Sir Fred Hoyle, the noted creationist astronomer. Yep. Fair enough, Kent. Fred Hoyle, who was famously against the Big Bang Theory from the start, said that there's a sickly pall hanging over the Big Bang Theory. I would not be surprised.
I think it is stupid.
Yeah, Fred Hoyle did too.
I don't care what anybody...
question. So Fred Hoyle said that, but what was his reasoning? Kent, I feel like you would need to show us that first. His
reasoning was basically...
It's an appeal to credibility, essentially, because Fred Hoyle had credibility.
Fred Hoyle was a physicist, and he was also sort of like a weird atheist creationist. And he thought the universe was eternal, but that life couldn't just evolve. And like he had very strange ideas. But
what was his major contribution?
Oh, he was the first person to conceive of the idea of stellar nucleosynthesis. The idea that high mass nuclei were formed not just during the normal fusion of stars, but also formed during novae and supernovae, where higher energy levels could be achieved. And he was right about that. So he basically invented what Kent calls chemical evolution. But he was also an anti-evolutionist, and thought the universe was eternal, and the reason he hated the Big Bang is because he thought it smacked too much of Genesis.
What? Oh, because Genesis says that there's a beginning, and the Big Bang was a beginning.
Right.
So, for him, if he could prove there was no beginning, it would disprove the Bible or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And this is who Kent is using as his authority quote for why the Big Bang is in trouble. Maybe not a source that would really agree with Kent on many things.
Beliefs, that doesn't bother me. But see, the problem is, they want to use my tax dollars to teach that to your kids in our schools. And that's where the problem comes in, okay?
Gosh darn it, using tax dollars to teach science.
That's still not an evolution. That's still not a reason why evolution is so stupid.
No, it's not.
You want to believe
it's not even evolution.
Enjoy yourself, but keep your religion at home, okay? Because it is a religion. Then they tell the kids the Earth formed from a hot
Is Kent at his house right now?
No.
Because he's. Why does anyone? Okay, hold on. Isn't this in America where we have freedom of religion? And Kent's telling people to keep their religions at home.
Yep.
Like.
Although I think at home is probably.
I
think at home is probably in this case code for in your private life, which would include private social gatherings, which I would say would include most churches.
Would that include videos that Kent films and sells and puts on YouTube and stuff like that?
Yeah, as a private business.
Okay.
Molten mass 4.6 billion years ago. This is part of the theory.
To be fair, Kent isn't teaching this in a public school to kids who have to listen to him.
Because he's fundamentally unqualified to teach in a public school, not having any degrees.
I'm being fair that when he says keep your religion at home, what he's doing now doesn't feel like that to me. According to the way you're describing it, it might be okay.
Yeah.
Still keeping it at home. That's all I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
That, so, yeah.
And it's in all the textbooks. 4.6 billion years ago, Earth cooled down, formed a rocky crust. I think that is stupid, and I'll show you why.
Why?
Was the Earth ever really
a hot molten
mass?
Wait. I don't believe him, but let's see if he can actually give a reason that would be why.
Okay.
4.6 billion years ago, and it cooled down.
I don't think it's
this textbook says, as Earth formed, the surface was like the moon. There were hot pools of bubbling lava.
These are reasons why I can't.
Yeah, this plus hot pools of bubbling.
What happened?
Hot pools of bubbling lava is not how I would currently describe the moon.
So, my Bible says the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So the Earth was not created a hot molten mass, it was created underwater.
His reason is literally because that's not what it says in the Bible. This is only reason.
Wait, so if the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, what that would mean to me is that God in some form is looking at our oceans right after he created them, kind of like flying the way I would fly in my space engineer spacesuit over, figuring out, all right, I guess, because it's Genesis 1, verse 2, right? So he hasn't created anything else yet. So, how does that imply there's an earth, and above the earth it's surrounded by water everywhere, which is what Kent's saying? I feel like he just said that now, which would be the original flood, the OG flood, Kent?
Well, at least in terms of the water in space, so you got to realize that the common Middle Eastern cosmology, which was shared by the early Hebrews, was that the firmament of the sky was actually a physical dome separating a cosmic ocean above the Earth from the actual Earth, as well as the cosmic ocean that is below the Earth and extends essentially infinitely in all directions away from Earth.
That's why the sky's blue, because you can see the water or something like that.
It's also why rain falls, because it's actually falling from floodgates in heaven that God can open.
So, okay. And Kent believes this is what happened.
Yes, except he's tried to adapt it to a globe Earth model, because he's not a flat earther.
Alright, so I need to take... I'm not going to do the gag. I actually need to take 2. Every time I do the gag, I don't take any, but I need to.
We'll take a drink for how stupid Kent is.
It is actually giving me a headache.
which means it has to be less than 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees centigrade, or it wouldn't be water, it'd be steam.
Steam is still water, Kent, but I guess it wouldn't have a face. I'll give him this. There wouldn't be a face of the waters if it was all steam, right? Because over the face of the waters does seem to imply that you're hovering over a pool of liquid water.
But if we're taking this literally, then this water better have eyes and a nose and a mouth, because that's what a face has. So you could carve that into ice, but you can't carve that into water or steam, Kent.
Ooh, so maybe
it had to have been ice.
Maybe God was hovering over a bunch of carved faces in the. That's kind of creepy, honestly.
No, not a bunch. One large face of the waters.
Oh.
So if they faces, would God lie and say
I
faces when he meant faces?
I hope it's a giant Zardoz face.
We're taking it literally, right, Kent? So faces is a lie if it's face, right?
Yeah.
Heavens and heaven.
So you think it was a big...
I could just sound completely nuts if I talk like Kent Hovind does.
You think it was a big Zardoz face?
I don't know. Maybe.
You've never seen Zardoz?
I don't remember Zardoz.
Zardoz is the movie where Sean Connery spends about 90% of the movie in a thong.
Yeah, I think I saw it on a Red Letter Media thing or something. I just picture this large face, and I forget the line, but the response is what does God need with a starship? I think
yes. Star Trek V.
You're not the real God. You need a starship. I'm the real God. That's what I imagine is happening in Genesis 1, verse 2.
Okay.
So the Earth was never a hot, molten mass, according to Scripture. Then when you look in the granite rocks, you find little tiny halos made of polonium.
Oh my goodness.
These polonium halos are absolutely amazing. Robert
So there's an Earth, and then there's sky, and then a firmament, and then water, and God's basically swimming in the water, or hovering over it, or whatever. So how would that prevent the Earth from underneath from being molten lava?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because the way I was thinking about it is that water was on the ocean, in ocean. We have oceans, right? God was there. And then how could the Earth...
Yeah, if we're interpreting it as the cosmic ocean, then...
That might make sense, but So Kent's basically saying the cosmic ocean proves that the Earth couldn't have been molten lava because there was water in space, therefore Earth could not have been molten lava.
I think that might be what he's saying, but he also might just not have a coherent idea.
100 Reasons Kent Hovind is so stupid. Thinks any water in the universe.
Okay.
A friend of mine from Knoxville, Tennessee area, he has been studying radiopolonium halos for a long time. I met him back in the year 2000 and went down to his laboratory and I got to see some of the halos through the microscope. These little polonium halos are interesting because they have a half-life of less than a few minutes. If the rock was hot, when the radioactive polonium decayed and sent out the little particles and made the halo, it would melt away.
Yep.
Like at 4th of July, they shoot fireworks up. Makes a circle. Does the circle stay there? No, it all falls down, right? There are probably none up there now from the last 4th of July, are there? You'd have to freeze the whole atmosphere to keep that sphere in place. This polonium would have to be decaying in a rock that is already solid.
Yep, it's true.
The Earth was never a hot, molten mass.
Oh, all right, so here's the problem there. So polonium halos, first of all, in review of Gentry's book about polonium halos, turns out that a lot of things he said were polonium halos aren't, because as it turns out, a number of elements with longer half-lives also give that characteristic radius upon their typical decay chain. Also, polonium is in the decay chain of several much longer-lived isotopes, which means if they're incorporated in the granitic magma intrusion that is going to form the magma, the granite has plenty of time to cool before those isotopes are likely to decay, and then as time goes, one of the decay daughters is in fact polonium, and it will get that characteristic halo. So in fact, polonium halos do absolutely nothing to demonstrate the young Earth.
It's almost like Kent doesn't understand at all to the level of what he should to talk about the topic he's talking about.
Yeah, I don't think Kent knows the first thing about
He has
nuclear physics.
just enough knowledge about how radioactive decay works to, this is where my conclusion is because it confirms belief bias, and like, I know there's more to this and it says, but wait, then this or whatever, but I'm done. I've moved on.
Yeah. All right, well, now that polonium halos they're so long debunked.
Try to argue Kent's perspective from an honest perspective, like I didn't know any better. An honest way to do it would be like, I found these polonium halos. Okay, what are the atheist responses to polonium halos? Okay, that. Are any of these responses valid or not? And then I'd have to look at that and then be like, okay, these are valid. I can't do this. This is not an honest argument. Or if I could find legitimate responses, then maybe do that. But Kent stops at step one. That's not how research is done. He would know if he had gone to college, taken a logic course, freshman level.
That would be nice.
Philosophy course, freshman level. He would know how to look. If you're a con man, sure, he's doing a great job. But if you're honestly trying to give an honest, what I had to do in my stinking healthcare ethics course is pick a controversial. Well, we were assigned them, like abortion or euthanasia or whatever. And I don't care what your opinions are on these things for this purpose. The point is that these are considered controversial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a case study, and then they usually would go to court, and then it was like, what would you do? And what we were supposed to do is, based on probably our preconceived notions on these types of things, because we've had opinions on these things our whole lives mostly, give the best arguments we can, then look up the 3 best rebuttals to it and pretend that we are trying to rebut our argument so hard that we might actually change our own minds and do it honestly. And I did that for every assignment. It's not easy to do that, to challenge yourself to do that. And I changed my opinion on one controversial thing, I think. I think it was like
whether or not pineapple is allowed on pizza.
I think I'd been against physician-assisted suicide, but then I was like, you know what? I think it's still controversial. I don't know how I feel about it now, but at the time when I had it all nuanced out, I was like, yeah, I think depending on the circumstance, if the patient is just only suffering nonstop, like I could see it being a way to not really violate the Hippocratic Oath, because that's really weird. Do no harm, but a lot of things are harmful that also are beneficial in the end, or might not work. Like the burn victim who has 3 years or whatever it was of like being dunked in the tank and coming out and his skin's peeling off, he's screaming in pain, been asking them to kill him from day one, and he's been tortured in a hospital, not knowing if he would survive. He did survive. He was permanently blind, and the dude became a lawyer to fight for the right for patients to end their lives when they're suffering. That was a stinking horrible story I read in that book. And it's like, when you're honest, let me just stop rambling here, but when you're honest, Kent, about these things, you'll understand why things are controversial, and you could maybe have a little compassion for people who don't agree with you, and maybe then you can convince them that you're not crazy, that you can be reasonable. There's reasons that people are on the other side of a controversial thing, and maybe you can convince them to join your religion. But telling them, you better get ready for the Big Bang because it's coming and you're going to go to hell if you don't, is not the way to do it at all. It's just going to drive people away, Kent.
I just want to point out, we went from polonium halos to torturing people in hospitals. So I'm going to hit play.
Robert Gentry's book, if you want a lot more on that. But all over the granite.
Don't get Robert Gentry's book.
Polonium halos.
It's trash.
So it is stupid to say the Earth was a hot molten mass. We have scientific evidence it was not. Here they tell the kids, though, the Earth was hot with large pools of boiling lava, and that is just stupid. It can't possibly be true.
Saying the Bible doesn't agree with that conclusion doesn't say that it can't possibly be true. I'm taking a drink. This is stupid.
It's still not a reason.
Yeah. It's a reason you don't...
Right. It's still not a reason why evolution would be so stupid.
Right. What it is, this is what Kent gave us is his reason why he thinks it's not true, but it's not a reason it can't be true.
It's his reason why he thinks a thing that he thinks is one of 6 types of evolution is stupid, but it's not actually evolution. I'm not going to give him that.
Yeah, no.
By his own definition of evolution, no. I'm going to go by an actual macro evolution. Like, if he picks something about those that is so stupid, I'll write that down as an actual reason. But he hasn't even tried yet because he's only talking about things that aren't evolution.
Yeah.
He's pretending are when he knows better.
Then they tell him life got started about 3 billion years ago.
He got to
See,
life,
according to the
though.
theory, 20
Hey, we're almost to evolution.
billion years ago, there was a big bang.
Bang.
4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down, formed a hard rocky crust, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup. And the soup came alive about 3 billion years ago. This is what the books teach. This fellow
Well, no one would really put it that way, but I don't really feel the need to nitpick that summary. It's close enough that I don't really care. It's stupid, but whatever.
says, both the origin of life and the origin of major groups of animals remains unknown. How did life get started anyway? Well, this textbook tells the kids oceans formed as it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Yes, boys and girls, millions of years of torrential rains created great oceans. And swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Well, I guess it is. It's totally stopped. Doesn't even happen. That's how slow it is.
Well, we wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of novel life forms forming today in a situation where they would have to compete with organisms that have been evolving for, 3-ish billion years. So we wouldn't expect any novel events of abiogenesis to necessarily even occur, because the chemistry of the Earth is very different now. But even if they did, they wouldn't persist, so we probably wouldn't notice them. So, okay, that doesn't negate abiogenesis. And look, we don't have a theory for abiogenesis, right? How did it actually happen? I don't know. But, so?
We know that there's life. And at the Big Bang, it's hard to imagine how this life could have existed then.
Yeah.
Because it's physically impossible. And that at some point between then and now,
we have life.
there wasn't life, and then there was life. And so we know what happened, Kent.
Wait, no,
Whether
Bent.
it was a miracle by God, which would still, in my opinion, constitute as abiogenesis, because we're still getting life from non-life.
I have a quick question for you. Is that shirt a band shirt for Scrantonicity or Scrantonicity 2?
Well, it used to be for Scrantonicity, but then there was a 2 drawn on there because
Oh, okay. Because
no longer fans of Scrantonicity.
Yeah, no.
We just like their drummer, but their drummer left and joined the far superior Scrantonicity 2.
Yeah.
Which no one went to see his band, by the way. So
Well, he's not just the drummer; he's also a vocalist.
he is also a vocalist and an accountant.
It's true.
This one says the first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. Was your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa soup?
No, because as described in those textbooks, the soup wasn't itself alive, although the primordial ooze or this, primordial soup is no longer the dominant theory. But I'm just going to take a drink for Kent being incapable of distinguishing between life and not life in the context of abiogenesis.
Well, I mean, he just basically, in back-to-back sentences, demonstrated that he's unwilling or unable to comprehend what the previous sentence,
Yeah.
what the first sentence of his 2 sentences actually said. Because it didn't say we are soup. It said it emerged from that soup, not became life. Not the soup became life. Life had emerged from there.
Yeah.
And guess what, Ken? If God did it, that's where he did it. Because that's where it needed to exist to survive long enough.
Yeah, that's all there was, really.
And everything, right? So that's where God would have created the life.
I think that's stupid, okay? Now, if they want to believe it, that's fine. I don't care what they believe, but don't call it science. What happened?
I would love it if at some point Kent would actually give a reason why it's stupid beyond his own personal incredulity. That would be amazing.
Happened back in the 1950s. A guy named Miller and Urey wanted to know how the Earth and solar
A guy named Miller and Urey. No, 2 guys. One of them named Miller and one of them named Urey. Okay, let's continue.
system had come to be.
His name was Miller and Urey?
I don't.
Maybe he's like...
I don't know who these guys are, so like.
I mean,
I thought
they're
his
scientists.
name was Miller N, like the middle initial.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't know it. I don't know who you're reading. I don't know if it was two guys or not. But if you
It
say
was.
you do,
It was.
way to go, Ken.
So they tell the kids he took a mixture of Earth's primitive atmosphere. We'll talk about that in a minute. He never proved how life originated, but he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself.
No. I had to read what Kent was lying about. He reviewed many theories on how this. Okay, it's the next sentence. He studied the chemical reactions of gases that existed in Earth's primitive atmosphere. Not he took atmosphere from the primitive Earth.
Yeah.
And there's a subtle but very real difference in what this says, Kent, and what you're saying it says.
Wait, are you saying that Kent might be cherry picking and misrepresenting his sources while putting them on screen?
He's lying about his sources very subtly to set up his straw man that he's going to bash in a way that real people who understand this stuff, at least to this degree, which is not a very high degree, can see that he's not even.
What you're saying, Bent, is basic ability to.
He's failing on every level except for being charismatic.
Bent, what you're basically saying is people who have at least a high school level of English skills and who can do the basics of fact checking can tell that Kent Hovind is full of crap. Okay.
Is that true? Now, did he really do that? Well, let's just study the facts here. This textbook tells the kids many important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life.
Wait, you're not going to discuss the Miller-Urey experiment? You're just going to skip right over it? Okay, sure.
Pretending to answer the question he set up.
Okay.
But really, he's just.
Progress from complex molecules to even simplest living organism was a very long process. Long ago and far away. Fairy tale kids coming up.
Kent, you know, things have happened long ago and far away, right? Like, that's... I just don't understand, like, that's a thing. Like, granted, that might be how you start a fairy tale, but it's also literally true of certain things. Like the founding of Ashurbanipal's library happened long ago and far away from where I am now. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it was a fairy tale. It was a real library.
First living cells emerged 4 billion to 3.8 billion years ago. I like that word, emerge. They use it all the time. Like that explains how it happened, you know?
No, it doesn't explain how it happens. It describes how it happened. If I say, hey...
What happened?
If I say...
It describes what happened.
Yeah, it's like saying, I arrived. Okay, let's say I go to visit a friend and I arrive at their place. It doesn't tell you how I got there, right? It's just true. I arrived. I might have gotten there by horse. I might have walked. I might have driven a car. I might have taken a bus.
Yeah, you arrived. It's a thing that happened.
Yeah.
It's a verb, and do you not know how verbs work?
Right, and the thing is...
I mean, I guess it does, but he wants him to use a different... What verb does he think does he think evolutionists use?
I don't know. I would actually very much like to ask him that question, and you know...
Living cells magically appeared between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. That's what I would assume that's what he
I'm slightly tempted to actually call Kent and ask.
Go for it, dude. He doesn't have to answer. But if he answers, yeah.
Well, first, I don't really want Kent on here because remember what happened last time I tried to interact directly with Kent Hovind?
Yeah, okay. That's fair. I'm not going to call him.
Plus, I imagine that he's probably in mourning right now.
Why? Oh, because of... Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, should we tell everyone why?
I don't... He might not care that much.
Oh, no, he cares. He cares, trust me.
Yeah,
so we're recording this on January 20th, and it is currently 12:18 Eastern Time. And so, in 2021. So, if that doesn't tell you why Kent might be mourning, well, just look up this day in history.
Look up this day in history and in United States political history,
yeah,
and like transition of power or something like that. And, I'm kind of scared for saying that because I'm assuming that things are happening seamlessly, but who knows?
I checked a little bit recently, and I've seen no news of.
I don't want any stinking news about it.
Look,
other than
here's the thing:
it happened.
There is no news essentially. So there you go.
Good.
There is no record of the event, they tell the kids. Look.
Well, yeah, why would there be?
What? Like, first of all, if they actually put that in that, that's kind of funny because it's clearly not necessary. But if Kent, what is Kent gonna do with this last sentence, dude? Is it gonna make me need like to do? Is it time for our intermission yet? I might need an early intermission.
We've still got about 15 or so minutes before I want to go. Well, maybe 10 minutes.
Good.
We know what happened, and you're going to be tested on this, but there's no proof.
No, that's
okay. It's not.
That's not what that means, Kent. That means that particular event isn't recorded. It's just like, okay.
Because there was no one around to record the origin of life.
Right. It's sort of like we'll take a biblical example. You know Joseph, the one who is Mary's husband and Jesus' adoptive father in the Gospels? We have no record of his birth. Does that mean he was never born, Kent? I don't think that you would agree that it means he was never born.
It's worse than that. Because what Kent essentially wants is for Joseph to have recorded his own birth.
Yeah, what would be recording the
Because what would be recording the event of life originating?
Well, I suppose it would be like if we had a fossil of it or somehow.
Nothing like magic.
Like maybe if we had a fossil of it, like the first organism was somehow fossilized. I don't even know how that would work.
Kent knows that.
He also thinks there's no such thing as a fossil record. So
Kent, even though he's admitted to in debates, that he's admitted to its existence in debates before, but he also says it doesn't exist. But does he think that with the first life is like there could be fossils of it? Does he think that's possible?
I don't know.
Possible? I don't.
Or maybe he's hoping that the first life would be something capable of like carving an inscription into rock.
Life has a skeleton, is what I'm trying not to say because it's driving me upset.
Okay, we'll hit play. We'll hit play.
Science. First living self-replicating systems must have emerged in this soup. I don't think so. Here's what students are talking.
Why don't you think so?
This picture of the different glass tubes and flasks and pipes going around. They tell them this is how they made life in the laboratory.
No. No one is telling them that. No one is telling kids that Miller or Urey made life in a laboratory, or that life has ever been made in a laboratory. The closest we've got is removing the plasmid from a bacteria and injecting a artificially created synthetic plasmid with a new genome, and then had that bacterium go on to go do bacteria things. That's it. It's the closest.
Okay, so when Kent knows that his six stupidities of evolution, he knows that whoever wrote this textbook doesn't use his definition, right?
Yeah.
So when those people use the word evolution, they don't mean what he means.
No, they do not.
So when he says, what did he say? Because here it says how the evolution of life, which is how life has changed over time.
Right.
Essentially, and Kent's perspective is how it came into existence. But he knows that the authors of this book aren't saying that because they don't call that evolution.
Right. And also, he's trying to say that he just tried to give this idea that this textbook is saying that the Miller and Urey experiment, which is pictured below, created life by highlighting was the evolution of life and connecting it verbally to this. But if you read this heading for 16.3, it says the Archean era. So we start off in early March on the 1-year calendar of Earth history. So that's where you take the whole history of Earth and you start it at January 1st and you end it at, December 31st. And you kind of remap it to a year so you can understand how long ago something happened, right? Yeah. The Archean era began. Many important events occurred during the Archean era, but he has that highlighted, but he's for some reason not pointing to that. He's talking about this experiment. And then we go down and we get among the different molecules on the surface of the primitive Earth, complex organic molecules containing carbon were probably common. However, progress from a complex. So this is not saying that the Miller-Urey experiment created life, which is what he's implying it is saying. So he's, again, being dishonest.
It falls under the category of evolution for him.
But
he's projecting that on others when he knows they don't define it that way.
And the thing that bugs me is, once again, he's lying about a source that he has up on screen. All you have to do is actually read what's on the screen. You know he's lying.
I'm beginning to see how it might actually be possible for Kent to have more lies in a sentence than words in that sentence. Because he can, and I know that sentences have whatever. It's hard to have a 10-sentence word with 11 lines in it. But like, my goodness, man, you can find several in many sentences that are.
I think your dog is having trouble getting up on the couch.
Yeah, exciting.
He said he studied the chemical reactions of gases that existed in Earth's primitive atmosphere. Oh, now this is important, okay? Notice up in the upper right-hand corner, he had methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen. No oxygen. He circulated these gases through these tubes through a spark.
You know why, right?
Right, because the thing is, the only reason... We'll go through it just for the sake of the audience. We'll explain it for the audience's sake, as Kent might say.
Pause so much, man, and we have to do. We just have to.
So, the thing about oxygen is that it's incredibly reactive. It will react with almost anything. And so, oxygen tends not to be in the form of free-floating atomic oxygen unless life is actively taking things with oxygen, breaking the oxygen off, recombining the two oxygens and excreting them, which is what photosynthetic, there it is, life works, right? They take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, they use the carbon to help build up their actual physical structure. So if you look at a tree, most of that mass is actually carbon dioxide that was taken out of the atmosphere. But then the oxygen gets converted into diatomic oxygen, which is then used partially by the plant to power its own cellular respiration, but the excess oxygen is then given off. And so it's actually ultimately a waste product of photosynthesis. And that is why Earth can maintain free oxygen. But if you don't already have life doing that, there's not likely to be any significant amount of atmospheric oxygen, because it will just react away with something. It'll react with carbon, or it'll react with hydrogen, or it'll react with iron, or almost anything.
I have a question about when you just described photosynthesis. Did you go beyond a high school level?
Oh, I went under a high school level.
I remember I went to this.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
School. I don't remember, and I may not have just paid attention or whatever. Or like the multiple choice tests were so easy, you just have 3 obvious wrong answers, and so the other one's right. But I don't remember learning. I don't remember learning the details of photosynthesis, like which oxygen from the water, from the air became the part of the sugar, and which one was sent back to the atmosphere, and like that level of detail until I was in college. So at the most, it's freshman level college levels. But I mean, honestly, you can read about this stuff on Wikipedia.
Getting through most high schools,
you could probably do a simple Wikipedia article and
yeah.
No, why can't it not?
Yeah, but we'll continue on.
That lightning, and sure enough, it produced a red goo at the bottom of the flask, and had some amino acids in it. It didn't come close to getting life, though.
Which was not their goal, and they specifically prevented anything that could lead to life from happening.
Miller excluded oxygen in a reducing atmosphere because life could not evolve with oxygen. Anything that got together would oxidize. Cut a banana open, lay it on the table, it'll turn brown, it'll oxidize.
Right.
Okay, so
yeah, that's true. I'll take a drink. Yeah.
I mean, it's basically saying what you were saying. What happens with oxygen in its free form?
Yeah.
Apple. So will anything alive. It'll oxidize. So that's why he didn't have any oxygen in the experiment.
Well, it's also because of the reasons for the reasons I said, a prebiotic Earth almost certainly couldn't have significant oxygen. So it's sort of a double-edged, or sort of like a double blessing, I guess. It's like, it's likely true that before life there was essentially no atmospheric oxygen, and also atmospheric oxygen would have been problems for the first life. So yeah, we have a double reason to expect that it wasn't around. One, because of life. One reason is because it would have precluded life. The other reason is because without life we wouldn't expect it. So yeah, that's a pretty good reason to exclude it from your experiment.
One of his gases was ammonia.
Yeah.
But this creates a real serious problem because ammonia is destroyed by UV light.
Okay.
And UV light must be blocked by ozone, which is made from oxygen. I got a problem here.
Ammonia doesn't just evaporate immediately in the presence of UV light, right? Like, if you buy a bottle of ammonia and you hold up like a black light to it, which is mostly UV, it's not gonna just disappear. Like it's, and plus,
Are you telling me that chemical reactions aren't always instantaneous?
yeah. Also,
an entire substance.
Also, it's the case that if Earth was highly volcanic, which it probably would have been at the time, that ash clouds can form, which will block out UV light. So it's not like ozone is the only way to block out UV light. Now, don't get me wrong, the ozone layer is very important for our modern, existence. And we should definitely try to make sure it doesn't go away. But it's not like you can't have ammonia in the presence of UV light. Like, it's... Yeah. I mean, heck, UV light breaks up a lot of stuff. Did you know that UV light actually can break up DNA?
Yep.
And yet, you can still go get a sunburn and not immediately have all your DNA turn to mush.
You don't always get skin cancer over every exposed area of skin to the sun immediately.
Yeah.
Just from being in direct sunlight for at least 1 Planck unit of time.
This textbook says several billion years ago, Earth's atmosphere had no free oxygen.
Actually, you have to be more than that because the speed of light isn't 1 Planck unit per Planck second. So,
Isn't it?
Well, I don't think it is.
I don't know enough about Planck times and Planck lengths.
I don't think it is. I think because those are down to like the 10 to the minus 30.
I had thought the Planck time was the Planck distance was the amount of distance a photon can cover in a Planck time, but I don't know.
It could be defined that way. I might just have a gross misconception.
Hey, you know what? Neither of us are quantum physicists.
Look, all I'm going to say is ignore what I'm saying, watch PBS Spacetime, then go back to what I said and be like, oh, yeah, he kind of almost understands it. Yeah, I have to keep rewatching because it's complicated.
Yeah.
I don't just read one thing and misinterpret it and go on and preach that forever. I'm trying to be honest with it.
Well, that's just simply not true. Ozone is made from oxygen and it blocks UV light, and ammonia, one of the gases needed for the experiment, is destroyed by UV light. So life cannot evolve without oxygen. But
yes,
also
it can.
life cannot evolve with oxygen.
Nice logic, course and logic. And
Yeah.
Well, I got a
just
solution
because
for that
one
one.
thing can cause the other doesn't mean that thing is only caused by this one thing. It's simple logic.
It didn't
Very
evolve.
simple.
Well, at this point, no, Kevin, it wouldn't be evolution, so you know what? I'll take a drink. You're right. Abiogenesis is an evolution. Here we go. But I also think it is time to take a quick intermission. So, we will see you on the other side of an edit. I want to take a moment to talk about something serious. There is a problem facing late surviving non-avian dinosaurs in modern America. Hunting is very strictly regulated, and only allowed at certain times of the year. This means that for much of the year we have to rely on farm-raised food, which means money. If you want to help a starving dinosaur, please consider donating on Patreon, or buying from my merch store. Links are in the description. Please help. Dinosaurs all over YouTube are depending on you to help them through the hunting off-season.
Oh, Nani? Dare? Oh, Ojira desu ka? はい。
And we're back. Welcome back, Bent. How was your intermission?
Well, it was quite eventful.
Wow.
A whole lot of things happened.
Yes.
Cups were changed.
Yep. All right.
Really.
Let's go.
And by the way, the Earth has always had oxygen, even more than it does today. Okay.
Okay. First, I'm going to say it's true. The Earth has always had oxygen. There's never been a point where oxygen didn't exist on Earth. But that's not the same as saying free atomic oxygen in the atmosphere, so I'm going to take a drink, because it is true. It is also true that sometimes in Earth's history it has had more free oxygen than today, so it's... You're almost right, Kent, but I think you're going to go stupid with it really quick.
Okay. Air bubbles are often found trapped in amber, like the movie Jurassic Park, you know, where they drilled in and got the mosquito blood. These air bubbles have 50% more oxygen than we do.
Okay, so I'm going to take a quick drink. Bent, you don't happen to know what amber is made of, do you?
Actually, I don't, but I think it's a carbon-based molecule, because I think it is from tree sap, right? It's a type of tree sap?
That's what it's made of. It's made of tree sap. Do you think there was tree sap trapping air bubbles before the first life?
It would be. Here's why it would be impossible to know who would have been there to record the event.
Well, here's one way you could know. Yeah, are trees alive? Oh, this is a tough one. Are trees alive? Yes, Kent, trees are alive. You can't use amber to test the prebiotic atmosphere, because by definition, if there's amber, it's not from before the first life. Oh.
I'm not gonna lie, man. This is bad.
This
one is pretty bad.
This is aggressively stupid.
He does, but this one is just like.
I'm taking a second drink just for how stupid this is.
This one is stressing me out, but.
Oh man.
I can pause.
Okay.
Right now. But this textbook says the mixture at the bottom of the flask was rich in amino acids. Oh, come on. That is stupid. It was not rich in amino acids. Let's tell the kids what they really found, okay? He filtered out the product. As this gas went through the tubes, he sparked it, produced this goo at the bottom, and he drew the goo off, because if it went through again, it would be destroyed by the spark. Now, in real life, you're not going to get a section of the ocean protected.
Why not?
They say this just happened by chance in the ocean. You can't filter out the product then. So
why not? Okay, so let's have a hypothetical. Lightning strikes the ocean.
I have many questions about what Kent said, so go on.
So lightning strikes the ocean, and now some of these chemicals start to sink to the bottom, and if it's in a shallow region, they don't have very far to go. But then lightning just doesn't strike there again for a while. Problem solved. Like, you know the ocean's really big, right? And lightning doesn't tend to just keep striking the same spot.
And I could be misinterpreting Kent, but I feel like he's implying that if lightning strikes in the ocean, because there's conductivity in salt water, does he think that conductivity just like spreads equally across the entire ocean?
Like it just electrifies the whole ocean?
The entire ocean at the same...
Because of video game logic?
Is that what he's implying? If he's not implying that, I don't want to infer that.
I think it might be, but I'm not positive. But yeah, so there's every reason to think that the products could remain safe after a lightning strike. It's just that in the Miller-Urey experiment, yes, the lightning was striking the same place over and over and over again because they didn't have an entire planet's worth of ocean to work with.
Secondly, what he made was 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid, 2% amino acids. So 98...
First, carboxylic acid isn't a thing. Carboxylic acids are a class of acids.
8% of his mixture was poisonous to life.
Wait, what?
So, I have a thing to say too. That's what I said.
Tar.
What?
He just said that at least, what was it, 90 7% of this was toxic to life, but tar and carboxylic acids aren't toxic to all life. They just aren't.
Okay, what I was going to say is when he said they call it like rich in amino acids, and he's like, it wasn't rich. Okay, what does rich in amino acids mean? Because I feel like it means something very different to Kent than it would to me. To me, you don't have amino acids. You're trying to make them from gases, essentially. When your end product is 2% amino acids, I think that's pretty rich in amino acids.
Yeah.
Because how many amino acids do you have? How many individual, amino acid chains are there in that? Like trillions compared to how much there was before? 0. So like, does Ken think it has to be 90% amino acids? Like, how many amino acids does he think would need to be in this goo before there were enough? How rich would it have to be? If it's just amino acids, like.
Well, then I would say this is a drink occasion because of how stupid this is on two ends. There you go.
I would not call that a success.
Well,
why not?
Okay. Hey,
they made amino acids when they were trying to. Like, that's a success.
That's
how else?
What else would be a success in this context?
That Kent is either lying about or falsely under the impression that they were trying to create life and that they only got 2% amino acids.
Yeah.
If they were trying to create life, no, I wouldn't say that would be a success, but they still accomplished that.
And they weren't trying to make life. They were specifically trying to test could amino acids form spontaneously under conditions similar to primitive Earth. The answer is obviously yes.
And there are 20 different amino acids, sort of like 26 letters in the alphabet.
There are 22 amino acids, Kent. There's only 20 of them that are commonly used by life.
There are 20 amino acids. Those amino acids go together to make proteins, like letters go together to make sentences.
Kind of.
Mostly he made...
You know what? That's true enough. I'll take a drink. Okay.
Just 2 of these amino acids. And they bond with the tar and the acid very quickly.
Depends on how they're defined, but I've seen like there's 26 amino acids.
Yeah, it's the definition is a little loose.
I personally think it's fair to say there are 20 amino acids because even though that's technically not true, like as far as I know, all life or like almost all life only uses those 20. And so it's generally true to the point where in almost every conversation you're having, it's gonna be accurate for what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the 20. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
More readily than with each other. It was a failure as an experiment.
But Kent, they don't actually bond more quickly with the tar or the carboxylic acids than they do with each other. That's just not actually true. Plus, the amino acid to amino acid bonds tend to be highly stable, which means that over time they get selected for, even in prebiotic conditions, because in a group of chemicals, over time, selection favors the stable chemicals. Just because it's like this. Like, let's say... Actually, you know what's a good example? Is distillation, right? So, liquid alcohol is less stable than liquid water, right? It has a lower boiling point. So, you know how distillation works is you take whatever you've fermented, right? And you raise it to a temperature that's above the boiling point of alcohol, but below the boiling point of water. Because the alcohol is less stable, what's left in your original flask? The water, without the alcohol. Because you've selected for higher stability. The same thing will happen. So if the amino acid bonds are more stable, even if there are more amino acid to carboxylic acid, or amino acid to whatever tar is, because he doesn't specify, then still, over time, you're going to get more and more of the amino acid to amino acid bonds. So I don't see what the problem is.
Amino acids are like letters of the alphabet.
I just want to clarify, because of my misunderstanding, I'm sure other people might understand, it's like 2 sentences. In biochemistry, non-coded or non-proteinogenic amino acids are those not naturally encoded or found in the genetic code of any organism, despite the use of only 22 amino acids.
Oh, it's 20. We use 22.
21 in eukaryotes, end parentheses, by the translational machinery to assemble proteins. Over 140 amino acids are known to occur naturally in proteins, and thousands more may occur in nature or be synthesized in the laboratory.
Gee.
So the amount of amino acids is actually kind of nuanced compared to just saying there's 20 or whatever. But again, it's fair to say 20 for this context. I'm not trying to say Kent was wrong or anything on that, but
that was good information.
But it is good information to know. And when people say 22 or 26, I don't know where the 26 came from, but there are 22. But then others
That was probably just me just misremembering.
No, it was one of the results I saw too.
Oh, interesting.
On my Google search, but I didn't click that link, and that it was like a Yahoo answer or something. I'm not going to click that.
Alphabet, sort of like building blocks. You have to have a bunch of amino acids to make a protein. Then you have to have a bunch of proteins to make a cell. And you got to have a bunch of cells to make an organism.
Does Kent think that cells are entirely composed of protein? Because they're not.
Seems to imply that there are no single-celled organisms.
Well, yeah, but Kent, spoiler alert. You know, I'm just gonna take a drink for Kent implying that all cells are made of just protein.
I mean, you do need the protein.
You do, but you also need sugars, lipids, DNA, carbohydrates, which I guess are just sugars stuck together, but still you need them. Like, you know, a plant cell wall is made of sugar.
It is chitin? No.
Cellulose.
Cellulose.
No, chitin cell. So animals have chitin, but cell walls made of chitin are unique to fungi.
That is a fun guy.
Yeah.
And one cell is more complex.
They are. Actually, it's the reason why it's almost impossible to overcook a mushroom as long as you don't burn it.
Than a space shuttle. And all he got was a couple of the amino acids. That's like me dropping toothpicks, and I happen to make a few letters of the alphabet. That's possible, isn't it?
Yeah, and if something comes away and sweeps away all the toothpicks that didn't fall into the shape of a letter of the alphabet, and then you drop them again and do that again, you know, selecting for letters, eventually you're going to get the whole alphabet, Kent.
Toothpicks could fall in the shape of a T, or an H, or an I, or an E. That's possible. But if I'm able to drop toothpicks and produce a few letters of the alphabet, should I therefore conclude that nobody wrote Webster's dictionary?
No, because we know who wrote Webster's dictionary, and we have no known mechanism for Webster's dictionary to come about without someone writing it, which is not the case for life.
And we have evidence that it was written, there was life around to record the event.
Right. And we have a guy, his name was Merriam-Webster. He was like, hey guys, look at this dictionary I wrote. We don't have that for life.
Dictionary. Let's use it.
Yeah. Oh, and hey, I simplified some of the spellings.
The difference between making a letter with toothpicks and making Webster's dictionary is about like making an amino acid and making a living cell.
I mean, at a broad level, that's not...
You still need a letter to form words, to form sentences, to form a dictionary.
Right. Like, if... An analogy here, if we're going to use the writing of a dictionary, might be like, if someone comes up to you and they're like, dude, I don't even think that alphabets are possible. The first step isn't necessarily to show them Webster's dictionary. It might be to be like, well, look, here's a letter. Here's how a letter works. See, now it's possible. And then you might step it up from there. So even though making a bunch of amino acids is a far cry from making life, and no one would deny this, including either Miller or Urey, it's still an important step.
He didn't come close to making life. He made the equivalent of a few letters, and he actually needed to make huge books.
But he wasn't trying to make life, Kent. That wasn't the goal.
And half of his letters were backwards, left-handed. This creates a real problem since the simplest proteins, the smallest proteins, have 70 to 100 amino acids, all of them left-handed. This really compounds his problem. RNA and DNA are all right-handed molecules, and they are unbelievably complex. And hundreds of these amino acids must be...
I think they're unbelievably complex.
Yeah.
But he may just, if that's exaggeration,
yeah, we're. I don't want to pick on him just for using hyperbole.
I misinterpreted that as not being exaggeration for like 2 seconds.
Yeah, but I will say I don't actually know if the handedness problem has been solved in abiogenesis research because I'm not a big abiogenesis guy. I don't spend my time reading the literature on it. Mostly because, so for me,
don't know a lot.
For me, like I've said, I don't care about abiogenesis, and it's not really true. I care to know what the answer is, but I don't care which of the options that are available right now is true, or if any of them are true. Like, if it turns out that this particular hypothesis is the way it happened, then I'll be like, oh, okay. But I don't have a dog in the fight.
Me.
Or I guess in the race. I don't have a dog in the race. And whichever dog happens to win, or even if no dog that's currently in the race happens to win, like, that won't be any skin off my back. I'm not a fanboy for any of them. So I do want to know the answer, I just don't care what it is.
To make a protein, and this has to be in a precise order. And they unbond in water much faster than they bond.
Actually, they don't have to be in all that precise of an order. Now, Dr. Dan knows more about this than I do, but if you take completely random, amino acid sequences, right, and you just toss a whole bunch of them into some cells, a non-zero number of them will actually perform functions that are handy for the cell. Randomly assembled proteins can and do have function.
And last time I checked, the oceans are completely full of water.
You know,
So Brownian motion is going to drive them away from each other. Not
the ocean is completely full of water. An ocean is composed of water.
That's it. It was a joke.
And
that's all he means.
He's not implying,
like
there's nothing but water. Like
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I could because his delivery was sort of joke-like, and he got a few chuckles. So I think it was just a joke. Like, look, don't get me wrong. Ken Hovind will say some stupid stuff. I just don't think that was one of them.
And that's me asking, not saying. I just wasn't sure what he meant by that.
But the other thing is, there are these things, Kent. They're called tide pools, and in tide pools, things can concentrate.
Together. It just isn't going to work. He did not make life in the laboratory.
Yeah, no one said he did.
Kids, he showed how life could have started by itself. Oh, that is just a stupid, okay? That's a lie. He
it's
did
all
not
stupid.
show anything of the kind. And every experiment since then has made the problem worse. They're finding more and more things that
Can you go back to that? I want to
yeah. Oh, sorry, too far back.
Oh, that.
Although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself on the primitive Earth. That is a true statement. By having a 2% amino acid from just some gas, I would say that would add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself on the primitive Earth. Now, I actually want to hear what Kent says, because he's going to mischaracterize this claim.
Yeah. It's just a stupid, okay? That's a lie. He did not show anything of the kind. And every experiment since.
Yeah, so he's just circling this, so he's expecting his audience to just read life could have started by itself and just assume that his interpretation of the goal of this experiment is true.
Don't read what he highlighted necessarily, or even the highlighted and underlined parts. Read the highlighted circle part.
Yeah.
Then has made the problem worse. They're finding more and more things that just couldn't happen. Don't call that science. But they tell the kids, 3 billion years ago, life appeared on Earth. Asked me to speak at this college in Boston one time. This preacher called all the colleges and universities around Boston and said, would you like to have Kent Hovind come speak at your college? Finally, one professor said, yes, he can come speak at our school if our professors can ask him any questions they want, because we want to show our students how dumb these creationists really are.
I don't know, because Kent has been invited to speak at schools.
Now, but it might turn into that.
Yeah, there's a fair chance.
How many times everyone stood up and clapped? I know, he doesn't actually say it. He should, dude. It'd be hilarious.
So the preacher called me and said, Brother Hovind, would you like to speak at this college and let them make fun of you for a couple hours? I said I would be honored.
That exact conversation didn't happen, but it was also a joke. So,
and all their students,
I'd be honored. I like that joke. I mean, I'm not laughing, but it's
not bad.
It's a little self-deprecating, and I like self-deprecating jokes, especially lighthearted ones.
Yeah,
because they demonstrate confidence, which is charismatic, which is an attractive thing you want in any public speaker.
Yeah.
Hence, another reason Kent can be charismatic.
Oh, I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry.
Speak at this college and let them make fun of you for a couple hours. I said I would be honored. So I showed up. There were 6 professors and all their students. I felt like Daniel in the lion's den. I got my charts out and I said, now, folks, I believe the Bible. Nobody cheered. I said, I believe about 6,000 years ago, God made everything. The world's not millions of years old. 4.6 billion years ago, there was a big flood. I'm sorry, 4,400 years ago, there was a big flood.
Not 4.6 billion years ago?
I'm going to misspeak. He's
entitled to no, everyone is. We have to be fair to Kent.
Not 4.6. And 2,000 years ago, Jesus came, and I gave them the basic Bible story, okay? Then I told them what they believe. Because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the Earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. And this early life form found somebody to marry.
Take a drink for that one.
And something to eat, of course.
And they chuckle.
But it's not just a joke, though. Kent seems to actually think the first life form was reproducing sexually.
That's true. That's true.
Slowly evolved into everything we see today. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. I seem to do that to them. He said, Mr. Holman,
I wonder why.
There are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. I said, yes, sir, you're right about that. He said, you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off of Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? Ha, ha, ha.
If this happened, it's important to know that a professor of this kind of thing is not necessarily the best person to debate a topic. They're the best person to teach the topic. And
yeah.
that's not based on their personality, right? They might be great at both. They might be horrible at a debate. So, because like I think what Dapper had said would be much more reasonable response than what this potential professor who may or may not have existed may or may not have said.
No. So far, nothing about this strikes me as obviously made up, but...
I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock.
No, no one is, so I'm going to take a drink there.
And that's the reason why. It's because Ken has a misunderstanding and then another one. Whereas if the actual first misunderstanding would be addressed by this professor...
I do like this cartoon rock face.
You could solve that issue instead of letting Kent be like completely nutso. But
so here's the thing. Kent Hovind not only didn't actually respond to the question, because this question is a valid question, which points out that, hey, if all, and according to Kent, it's canids. It's not just dogs in the sense of Canis lupus familiaris. It's Canis lupus, it's Canis latrans, it's genus Vulpex.
That's all one kind, according
genus,
to what he said in the past?
Generally, yeah. He's like, all the canines are a single kind. So, I mean, that's the dhole, it's the African painted dog, it's the maned wolf, it's the fox, it's all the canis species like the jackal and the coyote and the wolf.
There are just 2 animals that those all...
Right. But the thing is, we know that can't be the case. So, to answer this question...
I don't remember.
Will be 2, because dogs aren't cloven-hooved animals that chew the cud, so they don't count as clean.
What the numbers were, I just know there were at least 2 of many animals.
It was 2 of all animals except the clean ones, of which there are 7. And it's not clear if it's 7 pairs or 7 individuals, but whatever. So, the thing is, that this would create things like bottlenecks. We could look at observed speciation rates to see if it's reasonable for speciation within these groups to have occurred that rapidly by the time we know the modern species would have been around historically, and things like that. We can test this, and it doesn't work. If Kent wants to say it, he can't just do whataboutism, right? He can't just be like, oh, you know what, tu quoque, you guys believe something I think is crazy, therefore my thing isn't crazy. Nope, that's not how it works, Kent. You actually have to address the problems with your model. You can't just point out to what you think is a problem with someone else's model when someone raises an objection to yours. So I'm going to hit play again.
I had one lady, woman, come to me after a debate one time. She was steaming down the aisle, boy, she was mad. Oh, I could tell I'm in trouble now. I stood there quivering in my boots, you know. She walked up and she said, tonight, you said, we believe we come from a rock. We do not believe that. I said, well, ma'am, calm down just for a minute. I said, do you believe in evolution?
Yes, telling someone who's angry with you to calm down always works. Just life advice. Hashtag good advice. Just always do that.
She said, yes, I do. I'm a professor here at the university. I said, well, would you please tell me then where we came from? She said, we came from a macromolecule. I said, where did that come from? She said, from the oceans, from the prebiotic soup. I said, where did that come from? She said, well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years.
Hashtag things that didn't happen. I'm taking
You
a
can
drink
see
for
it
this
was
one.
slowly dawning on
This did
her.
not happen.
I do believe I come from Iraq, don't I? Yes, ma'am, you do. You ought to be proud of it. Hey, don't step on Grandpa, whatever you do. Look, that's stupid, okay? There's no kind way to say it. There's a great book dealing with some of the flaws in the Miller experiment.
There would be a kind way to say it, Kent. There would be a kind way to say it.
Yeah, probably.
There would be, from your perspective, there would be, they are lost and they need Jesus, and I'm trying to help them find that. That would be what you could do to not seem like a jerk.
Well, you gotta remember, Kent Hovind's goal is not actually to convert people who aren't Christians. It is to try to keep a particular kind of Christian within Christianity. And maybe to get Christians from other varieties of Christianity into his variety of Christianity. Kent Hovind is not out there to convert atheists or people who aren't Christians but belong to other religions. Like, he's not out there, like, trying to get Hindus or Muslims to convert or atheists or anything like that.
I think that he thinks that he is, and that his method is by hitting you over the head as meanly as possible with the truth as he interprets it. Because when
Maybe.
he says, like, I want to say, hey, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. Like, that's the response he wants to give to people to try to convert them.
Well, I'll say this.
It's not a loving way
I
to
think
do it.
I think his behavior, in which he almost entirely markets himself to Christians, betrays that his motive isn't so much to gain new Christian converts as it is to preach to the choir. Now, to be fair,
And also, where is he getting his income from?
choirs need preaching to as well, you know. I always thought it was a weird thing, because, like, look, I was in a choir, and I was always thinking to myself, you know, it's a funny phrase, because the choir gains benefit from the preaching as well, or at least they should, you know, otherwise why are they there? Like, why would you join the choir if you didn't think, it doesn't matter, whatever, we'll keep going.
More on
You
that
like
for your
singing
kids.
so much that you just join a church? You don't believe
Actually,
in
you know what? I do know people who've done that.
It could be.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's some good choir music out there. Actually, the choir director wasn't actually a member of the religion to which the choir was belonging. So, that actually is the case. So, there is that.
To study out there on the table, get the book Icons of Evolution. Then they tell the kids that these plants and animals, not only did life evolve from non-living material, then this life had to learn to reproduce itself.
No, by definition, it was already reproducing itself, or it wasn't life, Kent. That's part of the definition of life. If it's not
He
reproducing,
doesn't understand that life has requirements or
Yeah.
factors that are necessary to constitute life.
now you could look at certain things and be like, oh, well, it's sterile, so does it count as alive? Like maybe a mule, right? Well, here's the thing, though. Mules are made up of living cells that do themselves reproduce. So
Right.
yes. But if the cells couldn't reproduce, if they were just going around metabolizing but not reproducing, they wouldn't be alive.
Why would any organism want to reproduce more of its own kind when that's only going to increase competition for the food supply?
All right, I'm going to take a drink for how ridiculously he's anthropomorphizing the first life. Kent, it's not that anything wanted to reproduce. It's that what it did was reproduce without any desires, and the reason that persisted is because reproducing makes it so there's more of you, so that you persist into the future. Because
You have to explain that to Kent why reproduction is necessary for life
Right.
to continue existing. That's why I thought we were taking a drink. I'm taking a drink for that.
Yep,
I'm finishing this water for that. No, don't. I'm going to ask people don't finish large amounts of alcohol for this. I'm going to finish this water for this.
there you go.
Because I do the water, the non-alcoholic version of the drinking rules.
The non-alcoholic water.
It's, well, the drinking game, people drink their alcohols, and my liver would be done by now.
That's why
Drink alcohol, I'm getting in bed. It would be.
I try to measure out how much alcohol I'm putting in each of my drinks to make sure that I don't die.
You know, back when I was a drinker, I didn't really know about how smart it would be to do like a beer, then a water, then a beer, then a water method. So maybe do that for whoever's out there and
There you go.
drinking too much for these.
Why didn't they instead evolve the ability to live forever and be happy?
I mean, look, there are there are biologically immortal organisms. There's one especially well-known one is the immortal jellyfish, right? It doesn't ever die of old age. But the thing is, things still happen. They can be poisoned, they can be eaten, they can get crushed. So even though we do have biologically immortal organisms, organisms that do not age, they exist, they still have to reproduce because accidents happen. So that's why, Kent, even if something did evolve, quote-unquote, to live forever and never reproduce, we wouldn't have it anymore because something would have happened.
Yeah, the reason I took the drink was because Kent implied that evolution has a mind and a goal, and that goal is to live forever.
Yeah.
As opposed to just something that happens on its own because of how the laws of nature work.
Get better, Kent. Oh, Mothra. Drink for Mothra. No, I say get better, Kent, but this was like something like 7 years ago. Or actually, it would have had to have been more. This is going to be around like 10-ish years ago at least. And Kent hasn't got better. In fact, if anything, he's gotten worse because he's way less fun to listen to now. Like, seriously, if you go to his channel and you look at some of the stuff that's on there, it's just so boring. I remember I was actually excited when Kent Hovind got out of jail and started doing debates again. I actually called...
Dude, I wouldn't be here, and I don't know if you'd be here either, because like that's why we got back into watching Kent Hovind. That's how the Kent with Bet thing ever even started. Like,
actually, I remember when I first found out about one of his first debates. I think it was the King Croc debate. It was one of his first debates after getting out of prison. I actually called a friend of mine that I've talked about this before. Like Josh, myself, and my friend Don. We all went to this church that was having a creationist speak there, and we just were there to listen to creationist nonsense together. And when Kent Hovind got out of jail and started doing debates again, I called Dawn. That was who I called. I called her up and I was like, hey, did you know Kent Hovind's out of jail and he's doing debates again? And she was like, wait, really? And I was like, yes. So, like, yeah, I was excited. But anyway.
And you were excited, but you weren't a Kent Hovind follower.
No, I was excited because it was going to be more cringy nonsense I could laugh at.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a very ironic... Like, I can say I'm sort of a fan of, like, classic and early out-of-jail Kent Hovind, but it's an ironic fan. Like, I'm a hipster-type fan. Like, you know, I like to sit around and make fun of him while I sip my cold brew coffee.
Yeah. Cold brew is good.
Cold brew is good because it's less acid, and... Oh! Drink from Mothra.
I don't do well with acidic coffee.
Yeah, I don't either. Acidic coffee gives me heartburn, and so...
I already have acid reflux, and like, yeah, I need the most alkaline coffee I can get, basically.
Yeah, or the least acidic. I don't know if it ever actually goes alkaline.
Depends on how much bleach you add to it. Don't add bleach to consuming.
Also, not medical advice. Also, MMS, that's bleach. Don't use it. If you don't know what MMS is, don't look into it. Or do, and then just don't use it.
You ever think about that? I was in a debate one time, and we had question and answer time at the end. The student stood up and he said to the evolutionist, he said, sir, how did male and female evolve? The professor got up and he said, well, that is a giant mother may I step in the evolution story. A mother may I step? This is science.
I will agree, that is a stupid response. Now, we don't know in every lineage that has male and female, which is not all of them, by the way. There are plenty of species that are either asexual or sexually reproducing, but don't have it, male or female. However, in those species that do have male and female gametes, it's not always clear how it happened. But here's a plausible sequence of events, right? So one of the first distinctions in multicellular organisms that comes around, that makes them multicellular, is a distinction between somatic and reproductive cells. Somatic cells produce the main body of the organism, and are the things that do most of the work that it takes to keep the organism alive. Reproductive cells have one job: make new instances of that species. Now,
and those usually have different numbers of chromosomes, the somatic cells.
Well, they don't always start out that way. In very, very, very basal multicellular organisms, they actually tend to start out with just the same number of chromosomes. And one thing is that those very, very primitive multicellular organisms actually tend to be haploid and not diploid. But if you get it so that some mutation happens so that these haploid cells can combine with each other to make a diploid genome, you get to have additional mixing, which makes that population hardier. So now you get diploid organisms which have a selection pressure to create haploid reproductive cells, which are now called gametes, which then combine with other gametes to make new diploid organisms that now have gene mixing. Okay, but they're all more or less identical. So why might it be advantageous to make different gametes? So maybe by size differentiation. Well, if only some gametes can combine with others, there are a few advantages, one of which is just that when you release a bunch of gametes, you're going to get less self-crossing, right? Because self-crossing is always a risk. You get lower genetic diversity when you self-cross. So less self-crossing is always good. That's just one reason why you might get a difference in the gametes. And now suddenly you have organisms that are producing ova and spermatozoans, or whatever the equivalent is, like in plants, it's spermatophytes, and I think it's still called ovum. So, you know, you get these different kinds of gametes. And then, in some groups, like many animals, you then further specialize to completely eliminate self-crossing, and you get two reproductive classes, one of which produces gametes that are larger, and one that produces gametes that are smaller. The mating group that produces the larger gametes is female. The mating group that produces the smaller gametes is male. There you go. It's actually not that crazy complicated of a situation. Like, evolution actually has this pretty well explained and understood. Now, like I said, the exact path and exact mechanism for every group that reproduces sexually is not clear. But yeah, this is actually not some big mystery. And the fact that some professor didn't have a clear idea of it probably just indicates that that's not the field he was studying. I mean, which... So, professors tend to specialize in fairly narrow fields, right? Like, I remember one of my professors was a historian of women laborers in the United States in the 1800s. That was what he studied. He didn't study...
Why is that?
Because it was a topic that he knew a lot about.
Is it because when you really get into the nitty-gritty, you can actually learn a tremendous amount of information on topics that are that narrow?
Oh, yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah, you can spend a whole lifetime doing nothing but studying that.
Scientists do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, they're the general, you know, it's almost like medicine. Like, you have your family doctor who knows a little bit about everything, and then they're going to always refer you to a specialist if it's above their, you know, that's what they're there for. They're not supposed to know everything about everything. They're supposed to recognize which doctor they need to send you to if it's something that's serious at all, basically. So
now, don't get me wrong. It's not like my professor, who was primarily a scholar in the field of women laborers in the 19th century. He also taught some general, like, historical methods classes and some sort of broader American history classes, but these were all intro-level classes to these topics. If you wanted to ask him about, like, you know, the in-depth, you know, ideological development of specific branches of abolitionism in the late 19th century, he'd be like, I don't know. And in fact, I did an independent study with him, and that was one of the topics. But what he was grading me on wasn't based on his knowledge, it was based on my ability to do primary research. So I was going to the library and looking up actual letters and newspaper articles from the time period in question and holding them in my hand and transcribing them from the handwritten cursive down into my computer. So that was what he was grading me on. But he couldn't necessarily assess, past the fact that I was making the citations, whether or not this was all true based on his previous knowledge. He didn't have to. But yeah, you get these really narrow specializations. And most professors have some particular area. And this guy probably just didn't do a whole lot on the evolution of sex because, well, most biologists don't. Because most of the time you can just take that as it's just there and you just work from it. But yeah.
You know, pick any narrow topic in biology. Most biologists don't do that.
Yeah.
It goes for every field. You know, it just, come on.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go.
Kent thinks he's an expert on all of these things. Like, really, it really takes a lifetime of work to be an expert on any one very narrow thing.
Yeah. Kent has said that he's an expert on dinosaurs and the Bible, And we've shown that I just myself, without being an expert on either, know more than Kent about both.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so according to them, for the next few billion years or hundreds of millions of years, life learned to produce something other than its own kind.
Nope. Law of monophyly. I'm taking a quick drink, and we're just going to push on through.
Of course, today everything only produces its own kind, but they say long ago and far away, they were able to do something different.
Kent, until you define kind, until you define kind, there you go, that's the sentence. You saying that it produced something other than its own kind is meaningless. It just doesn't mean anything.
Textbooks will say we started like a bacteria and slowly evolved to a human.
I don't...
I think that's stupid. But if you want to believe that.
Wait, does this actually even include... this is so fuzzy, but I don't think that... Oh, I guess that bottom thing that you guys can't see because it's cut off on your screen kind of looks like a flagellated bacterium, so maybe that's what it means. But I don't like this chart.
Here, so... one textbook may imply or straight up say that we all evolved from bacteria, right?
Yeah.
Which would be that would be one stupid thing about evolution in a textbook.
Also,
that would be one. We've reached one potentially.
This phylogenetic chart I don't think is very accurate because it's showing acorn worms and tunicates evolving from a chordate common ancestor, which I believe acorn worms are basal to chordata within Deuterostomia, so I don't think that that's terribly accurate, but
the citation essentially doesn't exist. It just says typical textbook.
It's true.
Tree of life in quotes. So like
Kent might have had this drawn up for himself. That's true. Yeah.
So if he can cite that this is actually in an actual textbook.
Also, I think it has
would qualify as one reason.
I think it's also listing penis worms and I don't even know what that is. Is that a polychaete as sister groups? I don't think that's right, but I'm not positive.
That's perfectly fine. Those trees of life that they put in the textbooks for your kids are a bunch of nonsense. And even evolutionists will admit that. Stephen Jay Gould, the Marxist professor at Harvard University.
Marxist professor. Not just professor, he's a Marxist professor. It's very important that we know his political leanings. Very important.
He says that evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks are not the evidence of fossils. It's only inference. We infer, we imply, we hope it happened this way.
So they're actually both conclusions and they're also hypotheses. So you see which hypothesis seems most likely, and then you put that down as a cladogram or a phylogenetic tree, depending on what you're doing. And the thing is, Stephen Jay Gould, every time, basically, you see a Stephen Jay Gould quote, and actually I'm going to go back so I can see it.
Harvard University, he says that evolutionary trees that adorn our...
No, he doesn't have ellipses. But here's the thing. Basically, every time that you see Stephen Jay Gould quoted by creationists, he is being quote mined because what he's almost always talking about is he's talking against the idea of gradualism and in favor of his own pet theory of punctuated equilibrium, which has since in, subsequent time become more and more, not quite dominant, but more and more reasonably well accepted as a major source of as a major explanation for how evolution works at the macroevolutionary scale. And punctuated equilibrium basically goes like this. While an environment is more or less the same over a long period of time, organisms become well adapted and do not undergo significant morphological modification. But certain groups may break off and enter new habitats in which they will undergo relatively rapid morphological evolution. And then if they are reintroduced into the original range, they will appear in the fossil record as an entirely new species or sometimes new genus with no real intermediates between them and their sister group. But on larger scales, we do get intermediates. Like, we get intermediates between what we would nowadays call, like, say, different classes or phyla or things like that. Like, we do actually have intermediate fossils, even between families. But at the genus and species level, we often don't. And Stephen Jay Gould is explaining why. Yeah. So, well...
textbooks
I was going to
are
ask a
not
question, but you
the
already
evidence of
answered it.
fossils.
Oh, okay.
It's only inference. We infer, we imply, we hope it happened this way.
No.
This textbook says
Not
all the many.
for implying hope, Kent.
Yeah.
Do you not know what those? Watch The Office so you can learn the difference between infer and imply, and then don't just jump to hope for no reason after that, Kent. Because infer, imply, it's not like you're taking a ramp up towards hope. That's not how those words work.
Forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor. What?
Okay, let's see what this actually says. Forming of organic compounds. Your time of arrival is about 4.6 billion years ago, which is when scientists believe Earth first came into being. Advisedly, you put on your protective clothing and respirating equipment. So we're this scenario, we're pretending we're time traveling. Okay.
Good advice.
So you could not survive a second without them. The overall scene is one of violence. Prolonged lightning and erupting volcanoes surround you. Meteorites and ultraviolet radiation, UV, make surface heat fearsome. There's no signs of life anywhere. You decide to leave and come back later, a long time later, perhaps after life has come to the planet. You wonder how that life will evolve, but you don't care to stick around in these unfriendly conditions long enough to find out. And apparently this is all taken from Glencoe Biology, 1994, page 324. And yeah, Kent even has it handwritten in at the bottom. Simple molecules from the atmosphere. All the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. What were those first cells like? How do we know? What events led up to their formation? No traces of those events remain, and scientists can't travel back in time to witness what happened. Instead, they turn to scientific methods of observing data, forming hypotheses, and making predictions, and constructing experiments to test their predictions. None of this is crazy or objectionable. I don't know.
You mean the birds and the bananas?
Yes.
So no traces of those events remain makes Kent think there's no reason to think that these things happened.
Right.
He's just not being honest with how he's going to interpret very reasonable sentences.
Yeah. All right. We are almost done. We're going to get, I think, one more statement in from Kent, and then I think we'll be done.
Isn't that what he says? Found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. Well, in the first place, there's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism, okay? One single cell is more complex than a space shuttle. There's no such thing as a primitive single-celled organism. We talk about that on video number 4 of our series.
Like it could be used to compare to something.
Yeah, well,
primitive.
That's actually a good point. Is that the first cells were not nearly as complicated as current cells. Like no one is hypothesizing that the first cell was nearly as complicated as any modern cell, even the simplest modern cells.
Primitive.
Right. So yeah, that's crazy. But I think we are going to wrap it up. Bent, do you have anything that you want to plug?
I have nothing to plug today.
No? Okay. Well,
no, nothing at all.
All I had to say is thank you for watching this pre-recorded Kent with Bent. Sorry it wasn't live, but you know, sometimes things come up in life.
It's live for me. Does that count?
Yes. But I also want to say, please do like the video and subscribe if you haven't done either of those already. And of course, if you want to support the channel, there are links in the description to Teespring, Patreon. You can join the channel, all that great stuff. And if you don't or can't, that's great too. Liking and subscribing and sharing the video also helps. And that's it. I'm the Dapper Dino. I'd like to just take a moment to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above: Ben Tovand, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, and The Venerable Bede. My channel members and patrons help make this a much more stable income, because as you might know, ad income varies wildly from month to month, even with the same number of views. And it really helps this channel stay on the air. But if a monthly pledge, or a yearly pledge, which I have now activated, isn't right for you, there's a merch store linked in the description, and every like, share, and subscription really helps the channel grow. Also, those pledging $10 or above will have access to free 3D art assets, including materials and models, which will be made for Blender by me and can be used in any project without crediting me